Let's go back in time, way back. About 4,700 years ago, something absolutely incredible rose up out of the Egyptian desert, and it literally changed the world. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a revolution carved in stone, and it kicked off the entire age of the pyramids. So in this explainer, we're going to dig in and find out exactly how they pulled it off.
So take a look at this. This is the step pyramid of King Djoser. Now to us, yeah, it looks ancient, but back in its day, this was the moon landing. Seriously, in a world built mostly from mud and reeds, this was the very first skyscraper, a giant monument built entirely of stone, climbing up from the desert floor.
So the big question is, how on earth did they do it? How did they go from simple mud bricks to a massive 197-foot masterpiece of stone engineering? Well, this wasn't some overnight switch. It was a complete revolution in technology, in thinking, and in power itself. To really get it, we need to see what came before, and then watch the incredible evolution that happened right here.
Okay, so first up, the first stone skyscraper. We're talking about the jump from mud brick to monument, because this wasn't just a new kind of building. It was a whole new category of what was possible. It was a stairway to the heavens, and it was all dreamed up and built during the reign of just one king.
Before Djoser came along, a king's tomb was a mastaba. You know, a pretty simple, low, flat-roofed building made out of mud brick. Humble, really. But then you get the pyramid. It's not just that it's taller, it's a whole different ballgame. It's made of stone, and it represents a level of ambition that was totally unheard of. And you have to understand, for generations upon generations, the mastaba was it. It was the standard, no questions asked. It was functional, sure, but it was completely tied to the earth. The idea of cutting and stacking thousands and thousands of tons of stone to reach for the sky, it was just unthinkable. Nobody was even considering it.
And here's what's so cool. The pyramid wasn't built from some grand final blueprint. It actually evolved, right there on the construction site. They started with a basic stone mastaba, but then they just didn't stop. They made it bigger. Then they started stacking smaller ones on top, creating a 4-step version. And then they went for it again, expanding it to the final 6-step pyramid we see today. This was innovation happening in real time.
The end result was so much more than a tomb. It was a turning point for all of human history. This was the first time our species had ever gotten organized on such a massive scale to build something so huge entirely out of stone. It set a precedent that would echo for thousands of years.
Now, a revolution like this doesn't just happen by itself. It takes people. And in this case, it really came down to two major figures. You had a king with a vision for eternity, and you had a genius who could actually make that vision real.
So first, meet King Djoser. Around 2686 BCE, he was on the throne, and he basically looked at the mud brick tombs of his ancestors and said, "Nope, we can do better. We can build for forever." That incredible ambition was the spark that lit the fuse for this whole revolution.
Of course, if you're going to build something that spectacular, you need to make sure everyone knows it's yours, right? For all time. This is where the cartouche becomes so important. It's that oval shape that encloses the king's name, acting kind of like a royal logo, forever branding this incredible monument with his identity.
And this is the guy who made it all possible, Imhotep. Look, if Djoser supplied the what, Imhotep delivered the how. He was the master builder, the genius who figured out the enormous puzzle of turning a king's wild dream into millions of tons of limestone.
And calling him Hotep just an architect really doesn't do him justice. This guy was a true polymath. He was the king's vizier, his chief minister. He was a doctor, a priest, a scribe, basically one of the first certified geniuses in recorded history. And you needed that incredible range of skills to manage a project this ridiculously complex.
But here's the thing. Even a visionary king and a genius architect can't move mountains of stone all by themselves. The pyramid is also a monument to something else that was being built at the exact same time, a powerful, organized, centralized Egyptian state.
It's really crucial to wrap your head around the sheer level of organization this took. You have to quarry all that stone, you have to transport it, you have to feed thousands of workers, and you have to coordinate all the skilled craftsmen. This was way more than an architectural project. It was a massive stress test for the entire nation's ability to get things done.
And to manage all that, Egypt basically had to invent new tools for running a country. You needed a centralized government strong enough to organize a massive workforce. You needed a whole class of professional managers just to handle the logistics. You had to invent new ways to quarry stone on an industrial scale. And it created a whole new level of respect for experts like Imhotep, the brains behind the whole operation.
So, what does it all boil down to? That pyramid is physical proof that Egyptian society had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just a new building. This was the birth announcement of a new kind of state, one that had more power, more organization, and more sophistication than anything the world had ever seen before.
So Joseph's pyramid was finished. But believe me, this was not the end of the story. It was just the first chapter. Building it didn't just leave a monument on the skyline. It created a legacy that would fire up Egypt's entire pyramid-building age.
Djoser had set a completely new standard for what it meant to be king. And now, every king who came after him in the Third Dynasty felt the pressure to follow suit. Guys like Sekhemkhet and Kaaba immediately started their own step pyramid projects. It's like all of a sudden, building pyramids was the only thing that mattered.
But this was a really steep learning curve. I mean, they were figuring this out as they went. A lot of these next pyramids never even got finished. They were constantly experimenting, pushing the limits of what was possible, learning by trial and error. But every single attempt, whether it worked or not, was a vital lesson for what was coming next.
And that's the real takeaway here. That's the ultimate legacy. Everything the Third Dynasty figured out, how to build with stone, how to organize a country, it became the blueprint for the entire Old Kingdom. The Great Pyramids at Giza, those wonders of the world, were only possible because of the foundation that was laid both literally and figuratively right here at Saqqara.
So they had taken that first, massive step. They had proven that human beings could build a mountain. And in doing so, they kicked off an architectural arms race that would define ancient Egypt for centuries. Now there was only one question left to answer. How much bigger could they go?